Good morning, everybody. We're glad you can make it to chapel this morning. Oh, there's the mic. I'd invite you guys to stand and worship with us. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, your perfect love is casting out fear. And even when I'm storms of this life, I won't turn back. I know you are near.
Those who are viewing us online, either right now or maybe later in the day or in the week. I'm sure glad to see you here as well. Well, we're going to begin with our giveaways. We're going to draw 3 names. I'm going to invite Phil Davis up here. Come on up, Phil. Might have to stoop down.
Jake, or Jack, I'm not going to say, wow, this is starting off really bad already. Jack Brummel.
There he is.
Violet Kinau? Macy Clark Peterson.
You can't get one, sorry. Dr. Richard Houston has an announcement. Then we will sing together. And Johnny Hinton, a little bit later in the service, will introduce our 3 speakers who are going to be talking about the importance of mental health. So, Richard.
So, the very first time I went to Israel, I was on this big bus, this big tour bus. There was a group of faculty and staff who had joined in with this bigger pastoral group, visiting all the sites you would expect people to want to see when you go to Israel. The Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, Mount Carmel, where the prophets of Baal, the altar set on fire, the Jezreel Valley, where so many battles took place. We're on the bus going down this highway in the countryside, and all of a sudden it careens to a stop and pulls over to the side, and people start getting out. We're in the middle of nowhere. And we're sitting in the back, so with everybody else, we get up, get off the bus. And the guide says, you see this ridge line over here? That's where the Jews, the Israelites, were encamped. A mile that way or a mile this way, somewhere along in here. You see that ridge line over there? That's where the Philistines were encamped. A mile this way, a mile that way. You see this stream bed in between, in the middle? That's where David gathered 5 smooth stones. I gathered 5 smooth stones. I've given away 4. I have 1 left. This coming interterm, you have a chance to visit Israel and see some of these amazing sites where all these biblical events took place. There's an information meeting during the chapel hour this coming Friday. Look for an email with further information. Thank you.
I invite you guys to stand and worship with us again. This next song, I want to just invite you to, instead of just singing these words, to really reflect on them and pray them out loud. Because that's the meaning of the song, and that's the meaning of what the heart of it is. We bow our hearts, we bend our knees. Oh, Spirit, come make us humble. We turn our bow your heads with me as we pray. Father, thank you so much for allowing us to gather in this place. We don't take that lightly. We know that a lot of people can't praise and can't gather due to current circumstances. So thank you so much for allowing us to have this opportunity. Thank you for letting us feel your spirit. We know you are constantly there, but in times like this, you make it so obvious. Father, I just pray for Will, Naomi, and Mikey, God. I know that they have prepared this message that they are going to speak. Lord, just let their words just flow with you and all of who you are. And if there's just one thing that they say, let it resonate and plant seeds with even just one person in this audience. Father, thank you for who you are. Thank you for being the God that we can call our God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. Good morning. What a job it is to introduce such fantastic, phenomenal people. I could probably stand up here the rest of the day telling you all stories about these three, some flattering and some not so flattering. But instead, I'll do a quick naming of just a few things I love about these people, my colleagues and friends. Mikey Ward is quite possibly the best RD JJ has ever seen, and the only RD JJ has ever seen. He is also very intelligent, he's curious, he's fun to be around, humble and strong. I've enjoyed his friendship in my life these last 4 years. Naomi Brown is intelligent also. She's funny and intuitive. She brings seriousness and goofiness into my life every day. She is one of my closest friends, and I'm very blessed to know, one of the hardest women on campus. And Will Sunderland, a man who brings care and warmth to every conversation he has. He is genuine and bright, and I'm extremely grateful to have worked with him on Mental Health Week last semester, and also to just know him in his time at Greenville. There is neither the time nor the amount of words for me to express my love for these three. Each one of them will share today a separate story or something they're passionate about related to mental health, each giving about an 8-minute talk about something related to that. And I hope that today, as I have many times from the three of them, you are able to carry something with you from their stories and reminders, something of truth and care and life. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Toggle up this way. All right, my address this morning is all about Jesus, and Jesus is mental health. And that's not a conversation that we have every day. So my title is Jesus' Mental Health in the Wilderness, why and how we can learn to prioritize our mental health as Christians today. Today marks the beginning of week 10 of the spring semester of 2021. Woo! Yeah. We have thus far navigated the bewildering chaos of trying to do all of this in the midst of a global pandemic. We also find ourselves at the beginning of the 6th week of Lent, the season that seeks to prepare us for Holy Week, culminating in Easter Sunday. This upcoming Sunday, we will follow Jesus on an ass into Jerusalem. Until then, however, we are still in the midst of the wilderness. A wilderness without a spring break. I have heard time and again how that has taken a toll on our mental health. A wilderness with local and global chaos, violence, and disunity. A wilderness where it can be easy to be lost into despair, anxiety, and feel as though our mental health is on the brink of disrepair. We, like Jesus at the beginning of the Gospels, are in the wilderness. It is this, the bewildering 40 days of Lent, where we once a year are called to wrestle with our faith and are called to be renewed in the reality that Jesus is Lord. Kyrios Iesu. If anyone's had me in a class, you know that I'm passionate about this phrase. Kyrios Iesu. I'm looking at the Kessinger twins. Jesus is Lord of our life, And as we will find out in the coming weeks, Jesus is Lord over death. What I find peculiar and noteworthy for us today throughout the Gospels is that Jesus continually seeks out God, the Father, in the wilderness. As a good Jewish teacher, that is a peculiar decision by Jesus. Shouldn't he be going exclusively to the temple in Jerusalem to seek out God? Instead, he seeks out God wherever he finds himself. In fact, Jesus begins his ministry by going out into the wilderness or the high hills of Judea and dwells in the presence of God. This is not a one-off act in the Gospels. In fact, almost all miracles and healings performed by Jesus are preceded by or conclude with Jesus going off to stay with a few friends or alone and seeking out God in nature. In fact, next week we will find Jesus praying or meditating in the presence of God when Judas betrays him and the Roman soldiers arrest him. What is especially noteworthy about Jesus and his constant use of seeking out God in the wilderness is that at the end of being in the presence of God, he is quick to seek out or is sought out by others and meets them in their own wilderness. He seeks out and gives the Spirit without measure. In a Christian culture where we emphasize and overemphasize and squeeze the meaning out and the goodness of Jesus' healings and miracles, we miss and overlook the numerous times Jesus seeks out renewal and practices introversion and introspection in the mystery of the wilderness. Obviously, we know that Jesus is praying to God, but how and why? One of my favorite passages that outlines this and gives an example of this in the Gospels is John 6. There, Jesus performs the feeding of the 5,000. He walks on water. He proclaims that he is the bread of heaven. However, before the feeding and after the feeding, he goes up on the mountain, a place known in ancient Judea as where the divine dwells, and sits down with either the disciples or is alone. At the end of the feeding and escaping the crowd attempting to crown him as king, Jesus once again retreats to the mountain, this time by himself. To us, the untrained eye and ear, this is not especially noteworthy, especially those who have not gone to Israel go to Israel next January. However, to a first century listener, this is especially noteworthy, friends. Directly afterwards, Jesus walks on water, a sign that he is not only the prophesied Messiah, but Lord of all, heaven and earth. Lord over life, as we will remember in the coming weeks, Lord over death. This is confirmation of his proclaimed authority in John 5 through the Father. As stated earlier, Jesus in the Gospels seeks out God the Father in the wilderness. Afterwards, he often performs miracles and healings. Although we do not know every detail of these times of prayer, meditation, contemplation, or wrestling with God the Father, we do see Jesus renewed in his identity as the Son of God, to the point that he time and again seeks out the wilderness of others' lives and pours out his renewal. Some theology nerds would highlight how Jesus is participating in, quote, theosis and kenosis. Now, I won't get in the weeds. I'd love to talk about it. The more time in the presence of God leads to his emptying himself for others' sake. When I look at this pattern of seeking out God and performing miracles, this theosis and kenosis, I find myself asking a few questions for myself and for us today. First, what is the wilderness you find yourself in this morning? And what do you need Jesus' renewal from? Or what is the wilderness I find myself in this morning? And how do I need Jesus' renewal? As a residence director of this community these last 4 years, I have witnessed the wilderness this community has thrown many of you into. I have been awoken to a myriad of situations and tried my best to respond in groggy good faith. And yet I have often felt unprepared to meet many of you in the wilderness you find yourselves in. Needless to say, the miracles of Jesus have become so much more miraculous for me after trying to take on the role as the one others seek out in a time of crisis, especially mental health crises. And yet many times in situations I did not have the practical wisdom on how to respond, I feel as though Jesus met me and many of you in those moments. Sometimes through a friend, sometimes through a calming word, sometimes through a calming presence, Through it all, I've come to know that Jesus is Lord and that we as a community are suffering in our own wilderness. I have come to realize through this all too often in our society, and yes, our little community, we are asked to sacrifice our mental health for a number of reasons. A GPA, chapel credit cards, you could name any number of things. Wilderness, however, is full of isolation, lacking belonging and communion, which leads me back to Jesus. What is especially noteworthy is that his seeking out God in the wilderness is not for his own sake, but for the sake of the kingdom of God. Jesus goes into the wilderness to be in the presence of God in order to go into the wilderness of others' lives and be the presence of God to others. Which begs my second question for you this morning to dwell on. How has your personal prayer life, or meditating, or seeking out the presence of God, led you to seeking out others in their wilderness and trying to help them in being renewed? Now don't get it twisted. I'm not asking you to go pray and then promptly evangelize to the first stranger you see in this community. Okay, I don't believe in that form of evangelization. Instead, I'm saying that Jesus models for us how and why we should prioritize our own mental health. It is not for our own sake. Instead, Jesus demonstrates to us that we need to prioritize our mental health so that we can prioritize the mental health and well-being of others. And this, I believe, is what distinguishes Christian prayer, meditation, and contemplation from all other forms. Jesus in the Gospels calls himself and all followers to prioritize mental health so that you can prioritize the mental health of others. You may be asking yourself, sure, the Son of God exemplifies this. But how do I do this? And do I have a tangible example of such a person? And to that, I answer yes. 10 days ago, our community celebrated the life and death of a community saint, Dr. Jim A. Reinhard, one who was famous for preaching up here with roller skates on, Nike roller skates. I don't have those today. I did not roller skate down the middle aisle with balloons in my hands, but he did. Just imagine if I would have. That was Dr. Jim. For those of you who are unaware, he was described in his funeral by one friend as a physician of the soul. He taught for most years from 1954 to 1993, and he taught religion and theology courses. It is said that he taught more students than any professor in Greenville history. Although that speaks to the length of his career, what is especially noteworthy is that Dr. Jim most likely made more students feel included, loved, and led to the love of Jesus than any other professor in Greenville history. He had a long, but more importantly, wide and vast career. He loved God, he loved God's people, and he continually tried to model Jesus as meeting people in their wilderness. He met me many times, and the lowest points in my job here in this role. What was noteworthy was that Jim did not try to carry my burdens. When we became friends, he couldn't carry much or try to fix me, but he was someone I could trust with my burdens. He made me feel seen. He made me feel like I belonged and that I was beloved and deserved communion with him. At the end of every interaction, he would tell me that I was a dear friend and a gift. Sorry. Our community needs more Jim Reinhards. Individuals who come to Jesus in their own wilderness, people who are renewed by Jesus, and in turn prioritize their mental health not for their own sake, but for the mental health and well-being of others. Again, I ask you 3 questions. What is the wilderness you find yourself in this morning? What may you need Jesus' renewal from? And how can you, like Jesus and a saint like Jim, prioritize the mental health and well-being of others? It is questions like these that hopefully lead you into the wilderness of others. A reality where you hopefully begin to realize that mental health is not just an individual situation, but communal and societal. With that, I turn it over to my dear friend and gift, Naomi. But remember, dear friends, you are a gift. You are a gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey. So Mikey is definitely from a theology background. My background is in higher education and social work, so we're going to see a little shift in gears. So when we talk about mental health, we have a habit of reducing it to the individual while ignoring the community. We talk about what you can do for your own mental health or what steps you can take for a friend or a loved one who is struggling. But we rarely talk about how our societies, structures, and systems impact mental well-being. Our wellness does not happen in a vacuum. The environment around us is a major contributing factor to our mental health and to our healing. When we focus solely on the individual aspects of mental health, we miss the full picture. Now, I think that counseling is great. I think self-care is great. But even if every single one of us was in counseling, even if every one of us were taking all the right steps for our own well-being, if the bonds between us and the structures around us were not healed, we wouldn't be healed either. The good news is that this is the message of the gospel. Healing is not only for the individual, but also for communities, for relationships, for the world. There is hope for restoration, hope that we can be the beloved community. There are many structures that can exacerbate mental illness, such as poverty, white supremacy, patriarchy, exploitation. Oppressed communities often face the double mental health hurdles of more sources of trauma and fewer available resources. If a person is in an environment of continued trauma, individual responses such as counseling will not be sufficient. It's like treating someone's burns while the fire is still raging around them. It's important to provide that critical aid, of course, but it's equally important to identify and extinguish the fires that continue to threaten that person's safety. Like I mentioned, there are many of these fires in our communities, in our churches, that can result in hostile environments for mental health. I could focus on any number of issues, but this morning I want to highlight one area especially pertinent on Christian college campuses: the treatment of LGBTQIA students. This past week, a new report was released by College Pulse in conjunction with Soulforce. This report surveyed thousands of college students at Christian colleges across the nation, colleges much like Greenville. Indeed, some of you may have been involved in this study. This study provides a picture of what sexual and gender minority students are facing on our campus and campuses like ours. I want to share a little bit of what was found in this report. 12% of students at Christian college campuses self-identified as a gender or sexual minority. This isn't a conversation about them out there. This is a conversation about us. Queer students make up a large population on Christian college campuses, and they cannot be ignored in these conversations. 47% of gender minority students and 30% of sexual minority students reported that they do not feel like they belong on their college campus, as compared to around 15% of heterosexual and cisgender students. Let me say that again. 15% of heterosexual and cisgender students felt like they didn't belong on campus, versus 30% of sexual minority students and 47% of gender minority students felt like they did not belong on their Christian college campus. Sexual minority students are twice as likely to experience loneliness than their straight peers. Gender minority students are 5 times more likely to have been bullied on campus and 7 times more likely to have been sexually assaulted on their Christian college campus than are their cisgender peers. Compared to their straight peers, sexual minority students are 3 times more likely to experience depression, 3 times more likely to experience anxiety, and 3 times more likely to have seriously contemplated suicide. More than 1 in 5 queer students on Christian college campuses said they had suicidal thoughts while they were in college. Now, I don't know for certain whether any GU students were involved in this study, but I know that GU is not exempt from what this report reveals. Here on this campus over the years, I have heard multiple gay or lesbian students tell me, "I know that when I die, I'm going to hell, so why shouldn't I just go ahead and die right now?" We simply have to do better. This is a matter of life and death that cannot be ignored. On our campus, in this very room, there are queer students who feel like they don't belong, who came to a school that promised community and instead have been met with shame, bullying, harassment, and even assault. If that's you, I want to tell you that you do belong. You are not alone. You are beloved, and God delights in you. And to all of us, we cannot continue to ignore the way that our actions are creating a culture that makes 1 in 5 queer students question whether they can go on living. We cannot push aside these conversations because they make us uncomfortable. All of us, from students to faculty to staff, must do the difficult work of reckoning with the harm, whether well-intentioned or not, that has been done and is being done to the vulnerable in our midst. I'm not interested in telling you what you ought to believe about sexuality or gender identity. What I am saying is that we have a responsibility to shape a community that bolsters rather than decimates mental health. And if our doctrines and our biblical interpretations and our witness are making people want to kill themselves, maybe it's time to prayerfully consider whether our actions are reflecting Christ. The communities that we inhabit can be agents of healing or they can be agents of harm. But what they cannot be is neutral. So my question for us this morning is, what sort of community are we going to choose to be? Thank you.
Could y'all just take a breath with me? Let's do one more. So Mikey and Naomi have discussed our individual and communal responsibility in mental health care, and I'd like to transition into the church's role of committing to mental well-being by painting a picture of someone who lives with schizoid personality disorder. Schizoid personality disorder most commonly stems from children being used as objects. Most of them were treated like a vacuum cleaner, kept in the closet until their parents needed them. They're not close to people and try and keep their distance. Closeness itself is in fact dangerous because being close to other people means other people can manipulate you, take what's yours, and dominate you. So they believe that in any given relationship, they either have to stay and be nominated or have to leave. And if and when they leave, they feel so disconnected that they often fall into a kind of existentialist dread, one that is marked by meaningless life and dread and depression. They feel as if they're counting down the hours until their death. So relationships are a compromise between being trapped and being so totally alone that you almost feel as if you're going out of existence. Now, most of you may struggle with mild self-esteem issues, like when you regret saying something at a party and you feel worthless, like, oh shoot, like I shouldn't have said that, it was stupid of me. But people with schizoid and other personality disorders pretty much live with that feeling permanently. Let that sink in. So my question I pose to you is this: who's going to provide a sense of worth in people's lives if the church doesn't? I don't know about you, but I'm going to be honest. I'm tired of hearing the narrative that we are worthless, insignificant human beings, and that we are only redeemed through Jesus' love. There's nothing good, beautiful, or intricate about us, but God pitied us only through Jesus' love, by sending Jesus to send the day. No other part of the gospel points us to such conditional love. I don't know if you recall, but in Genesis 1:31, God declares humanity as good. He didn't say, well, Adam and Eve, you guys are sinners, so you'll probably screw this up anyway. No, he said you're good. If you do not declare yourself and the people around you as good, then you're going to struggle with worth for your entire life. If the church is truly preaching that its congregants are wretched, sinful beings at birth, then we are only contributing to the problem of mental illness. Now, as Naomi highlighted, many marginalized people are at a much higher risk for not having the need of belonging met. If the church does not purposefully go out of its way to include people different than them, then people will find themselves accepted elsewhere. Now, most psychologists believe that people's number one reason for joining any group whatsoever is a sense of belonging. Most people join terrorist groups because they're looking for identity, purpose, and a sense of uniqueness. Everyone in this room are searching for those same exact things, but most of you are just lucky because you found it within the church. Other people, such as our queer students, have not been welcomed with such open arms. And like it or not, the church needs people who identify as atheist, as queer, as Muslim, or any number of marginalized students just as much as they need the church. So what are you doing to include them? What are you doing to take care of their needs? Now, as Mikey spoke on meeting ourselves in the wilderness, I wish to follow up on what that internal meeting looks like. There are many brilliant people who have spoken on self-compassion and self-acceptance. I hope you've heard these words before. Carl Jung, a brilliant psychotherapist, said in a lecture to Christian clergy members, people do not feel accepted until the very worst in them is accepted too. Brene Brown says, I see now that owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we will ever do. Carl Rogers, the owner of person-centered therapy, says the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. The problem is when we see ourselves for what we are, when we meet ourselves in the wilderness, our first reaction is to treat ourselves poorly. We critique ourselves for what we don't do well and don't ever give ourselves credit for the things we do well. We hide our worst self from the world and refuse to admit our struggles. We deny our addictions, our brokenness, our torments, toxicity, and feelings of worthlessness for fear of rejection by others. And part of this is driven by our relationship with pride. So we have this weird relationship with pride, right? You know, there's one part of us that says, like, hey, you should be proud of yourself, like you're killing it right now. And then there's another voice that says, well, pride is the deadliest sin, and so if you think well of yourself, then you won't be righteous. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. I'm dumbing it down quite a bit. But I'm here to politely say, screw you, to that second voice. Pride can be a great motivating force for reaching your goals and making a positive impact on the world. There is a big difference between hubristic pride, which is paved with narcissism, self-aggrandizement, and antagonism at the expense of others, and healthy pride, which is paved with healthy self-esteem and genuine accomplishments. Wouldn't you know it, psychologists have found that those who regularly experience healthy pride tend to be friendly, social, agreeable, calm, resilient, and creative. So here's what I want you to do. Turn to whoever's around you right now, seriously, turn to whoever's around you and tell them, I'm killing it right now. Oh, y'all are a bunch of narcissists now. Y'all are going to hell, I'm telling you. See? Okay, so here's what I want to leave you with. You are all struggling in the wilderness. We're all in the wilderness. You have so many reasons to be stressed right now. Work, school, relationships, planning for your future, taking care of financials. The list goes on. That's too much if you can't believe that you are made good in the image of God. Give yourself some grace and compassion. Self-compassion starts with the acknowledgement that life sucks and life is hard, but it ends with forgiveness for yourself that you're not perfect. Even when you feel down and worthless and no good, remember that you're a freaking human being and you are good. The way that you see yourself can be the most dangerous weapon towards mental illness, or it could be the greatest tool towards well-being. So keep a realistic appraisal of yourself. You're not God. You're a person with unmet needs. As Carl Rogers says, I'm not perfect, but I'm enough. I now invite Mikey to come up and do a brief meditation exercise that I hope we all can sort of focus in on this introspective journey. Thank you.
Okay. So let's breathe a little bit. Let's breathe. Let's take a breath in. Makes me think of my son, Ezra. I have a nephew who's in the NICU, and we ask him to pray for Isaiah, and his prayer for Isaiah is always a breath for his lungs. But I'm going to lead you in a couple of minutes of what's called a daily examen, and the daily examen comes from Ignatian spirituality, and that comes from our Catholic brothers and sisters. And I'm going to ask you to put down your phones. I'm going to ask you to just be. I know it's very controversial. But this daily examen, there are several. You just type in daily examen, and you'll find several. And usually this is done in the middle of the day. But this is at the end of a week going into a next week. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to dwell on. This first section is all about Thanksgiving. So I'm going to ask you, how has God blessed you this last week? How has God blessed you through your interactions with your family and friends? How has God blessed you this week with physical and with mental health? What are your daily needs? How has God blessed you with your daily needs? Food, yes, even fresh ideas, shelter, and financial security. How has God blessed you this week in joyful moments? How has God blessed you with opportunities to make a difference in the lives of others? As you reflect on this last week, I call you to ask for clarity of thought and humbleness of spirit, that you may truly understand and appreciate the blessings you experience every day. How have you been blessed this last week? Now we're going to transition to a review. What blessings do you most often take for granted? What blessings do you most often take for granted? Music group, you can come up here. When did I pause during this last week to reflect on the blessings and God's hands in my life? When did I pause this last week to reflect in the midst of chaos, midterms, meetings, one-on-ones, to reflect on the blessings God has given this last week? Did I miss opportunities for joy because I was concerned about trivial things and lost sight of blessings? Did I miss opportunities for joy? How did my actions impact others? How did my actions impact others? How can I better honor God through the awareness and use my daily blessings? How can I better honor God and prioritize the mental health of others by being aware of our daily blessings? And this last part is a look ahead. As I begin this new week, how can I remain more aware and appreciative of my daily blessings? How can I better keep things in perspective and find more joy in the little things that I so often take for granted? How can I better use the amazing blessings I have been given to help others and perhaps make a positive difference in their lives? It is my hope that we dwell in these questions at the beginning of a new week, in the midst of the wilderness of Lent. From the fullness of his grace, we have all received one blessing after another. Pray all this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I would like to invite you to join us as we close our service and our time together with our final song. So if you would stand, that would be lovely. We are going to sing The Blessing. And our hope with this is that you will receive this blessing from us and receive these words from the Lord, but that in turn you would also be blessing those sitting around you. And so if you want to outstretch your hands to the people around you, that would be great. But receive this blessing and continue it on as we enter this new week.
Lord bless you and keep you, make his face upon